When I was 7 months pregnant, my father passed away from cancer. A few days after that, I was given an inheritance of $2.5 million. Not long after, I got into a serious car crash and was left badly hurt, barely awake, and stuck in a hospital bed. Out of nowhere, my mother stormed into the room, yelling at me to sign documents that would hand everything over to her. When I said no, she hit the side of my injured head so hard that I cried out from the pain. But what happened next was even more frightening. Hi, I'm Lena, and I'm 29 years old. I manage a small but expanding foundation in the center of the city. We offer shelter, food, and emotional care to women who have been abandoned, silenced, or hurt by their families. From the outside, this place appears peaceful, with bright walls, tidy hallways, and friendly smiles. However, what people don't understand is that this building was constructed from suffering. Sometimes individuals ask me why I chose this route, why I didn't just enjoy the life I was given, and why I use my wealth to assist others instead of living lavishly. I often struggle to respond in a single sentence, so I usually take a moment to walk them through the center, allowing them to see the faces of the women we assist. Then, if they're still curious, I share the truth. They tried to end my life for this money. I tell them my own mother and sister did this to me, and it still feels odd to say it out loud. Not because it isn't true, but because I survived. I wasn't meant to. I was supposed to be just another news headline. Young woman dies in tragic accident. No foul play suspected. But I'm here, alive, fighting, and building something that can never be taken from me again. I often sit in my office by the window, sipping coffee and reflecting on the moment everything started to shift. It wasn't dramatic at first. It began with a birthday I was never allowed to celebrate, a whispered insult, a cold meal when everyone else had cake. Many believe betrayal starts with violence, but it doesn't. It begins with silence. For me, that silence started in my own home. Growing up, I always felt like a visitor in my own house. Not because we lacked space. Our home was large, warm, and beautifully designed, but because I was never genuinely acknowledged. My mother, Marka, was the kind of woman who demanded perfection from others, but offered none herself. She lavished attention on my younger sister, Mira, who was the bright star, the cherished one. I was merely the other daughter. I still recall my 8th birthday. Mira had a full party the month prior. Balloons, music, neighbors, cake, the whole deal. When my birthday arrived, I received a dry happy birthday at breakfast and a store-bought cupcake. I didn't complain, I just nodded and smiled, having already learned not to expect more. My father, Robert, was the only one who seemed to notice. He worked long hours managing his small but successful real estate company, but always made time to check on me at night. He would kneel beside my bed, gently tuck my hair back, and say, "You deserve more than this, Lena. I see you." Those quiet words were the only reason I held on to hope for years. But Marka was sharp-tongued and dismissive. If I cooked something, she would say it lacked flavor. If I did well in school, she'd respond, "Well, Mira still did better last year." Every success was downplayed, every failure magnified. Mira, of course, thrived on it. She loved being the favorite and treated me like a servant. If I ever protested, Marka would twist my words, claiming I was being jealous, difficult, or dramatic. As the years went by, I retreated into myself. I stopped seeking approval and hoping they would notice. Instead, I concentrated on the only relationship that felt real, my bond with Dad. He recognized my efforts, admired my determination, and shared little jokes that no one else understood. I clung to those moments like a lifeline, but I didn't know then that he was already unwell and that the distance between us would soon turn into something much darker. I was 26 when we found out Dad had cancer. The diagnosis hit like a quiet storm. No warning, no time to brace ourselves. Stage 4, aggressive, the doctors said. We had limited months, maybe a year if we were fortunate. I felt as though the ground had been pulled out from beneath me. I still remember the look in his eyes the day he told us he wasn't scared. He didn't cry. He just looked weary, like a man who had carried the weight of the world for too long and was finally being asked to let go. Marka's reaction was cold and brief. "We'll figure something out." Mira barely glanced up from her phone. Stood there, frozen, the only one truly seeing the man who had held our family together. From that day forward, I refused to leave his side. I quit my part-time office job to care for him full-time. I organized his medications, prepared his meals, and drove him to chemotherapy appointments. I held his hand during painful injections and listened quietly when he needed someone nearby. I bathed him when he was too weak to stand and sat beside him at night when pain kept him awake. Marka and Mira couldn't be bothered. My mother treated him like a burden, mumbling under her breath about hospital expenses and being too young to play nurse. Mira stopped coming downstairs entirely. "It's too depressing," she said with a shrug, but I didn't mind their absence. In fact, I appreciated it, as it gave me more quiet moments with Dad, moments I'd never forget. We talked for hours about his life, the regrets he held, and the things he wished he had done differently. One night, as I sat beside his bed, he looked at me with a faint smile and said, "You're the only one who stayed, Lena. You've always stayed." I held his hand and whispered, "I always will." What I didn't realize then was that he had already made a decision, one that would change my life forever. A few days later, while I was making his tea, he quietly called his lawyer and rewrote his will. He never told me, he didn't have to. He knew I'd never ask for anything, but he also understood what I deserved. Dad's decline happened faster than anyone anticipated. Within months, he went from walking slowly with a cane to barely moving at all. His voice became a whisper. His body grew thinner each day, and his eyes, though dimmer, still searched for mine. Every morning, always with warmth, always with trust. Then one gray morning, he was gone. I had stepped out of his room for just 10 minutes to get fresh bed linens. When I returned, his chest was still, and the soft hum of the oxygen machine had ceased. I stood there, paralyzed, unwilling to accept what was clear. I dropped the linens and reached for his hand, but it was already cold. I don't recall crying immediately. My entire body went numb. The next sound I heard was my mother's voice from downstairs. "Is it done?" No grief, no shock, just those hollow words. The funeral was simple. He had always stated he didn't want anything extravagant. No long speeches, no large gatherings, just close family and a few old friends. I organized everything. Marka and Mira barely arrived on time, dressed in black as if it were a formality rather than a goodbye. After the burial, a man approached me while I was placing flowers at Dad's grave. "Lena Carter?" he asked gently. "My name is Mr. Daniels. I was your father's lawyer. He asked me to contact you after his passing." I nodded slowly, uncertain of what this was about. "We'll need to arrange a formal reading of his will," he said. "He made some recent changes. Your family should be present." I didn't think much of it at the time. I assumed Dad had left something small, a letter, maybe the house divided fairly, but nothing could prepare me for what came next. 2 days later, we sat in the lawyer's office, Mira, Marka, and I. The atmosphere was tense, thick with unspoken expectations. Mr. Daniels cleared his throat and began reading. "To my eldest daughter, Lena Carter, I leave my full estate." Marka gasped. Mira scoffed. "This includes my residence at Willow Creek, my commercial rental property, and the entirety of my savings and investments, totaling $2.5 million. Marka slammed her hand on the table. "This is a mistake." But it wasn't. Every document was signed, notarized, and dated just 3 weeks before his death. I sat there in stunned silence, heart racing as the realization hit me. Dad had trusted me enough to give me everything. Marka's eyes burned with fury, and Mira's mouth twisted into a sneer. In that moment, I understood this wasn't over. The ride home from the lawyer's office was silent. I sat in the back seat, still shocked by what had happened. My father, my only true ally, had left me everything. It should have felt like a blessing, a final act of love, but all I felt was dread. When we got back home, Marka exploded. "How could you let this happen?" she shouted, slamming the front door. "You manipulated him. He wasn't in his right mind." I stood in the hallway, holding my coat, my voice steady. "He was fully conscious when he signed everything," the lawyer said. Mira, arms crossed, at the top of the staircase, added with a smirk, "You've always been his pet. You must have cried your way into his will." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Their reactions spoke volumes. They weren't mourning the man we'd lost. They were mourning the money they didn't receive. In the following days, things worsened. Marka and Mira refused to meet my gaze, whispering in corners and falling silent when I entered the room. They would slam doors just loud enough to let me know I was no longer welcome. At night, I could hear them arguing behind closed doors, angry and panicked about finances. I tried to maintain my distance, spending most of my time in my room organizing, paperwork with Mr. Daniels, and quietly planning for the future. I didn't want to fight over what was legally mine. I only wanted peace. But peace, it seemed, was the one thing they would never allow. One afternoon, Mira barged into my room without knocking. "Mom and I talked," she said flatly. "You're going to divide the inheritance. It's only fair." I looked up from the folder in my lap. "It was Dad's decision. I didn't ask for this." She rolled her eyes. "So what? You think that makes it okay to keep all of it?" "I'm not discussing this," I said, standing up. "You got everything you ever wanted while he was alive. I got ignored. This is the first thing he's ever truly given to me." She laughed bitterly. "You think you've won, don't you?" Then she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. That night, I locked my bedroom door for the first time. I felt unsafe in my own home. They had lost control, and I had no idea just how far they would go to reclaim it. 3 weeks after the will reading, I'd been avoiding Marka and Mira as much as possible. The tension in the house had reached a perilous level. Meals were silent, and eye contact was rare. I began double-checking the locks at night, scheduling more calls with the lawyer, and sleeping with a light on. I didn't feel like a daughter anymore. I felt like a target. That morning, I needed to clear my mind. I told myself I'd just go out for a walk, grab some groceries, and get some fresh air. I put on a sweatshirt, tied my hair back, and quietly left the house, hoping not to wake anyone. The air was chilly, and the streets were nearly deserted. I had just turned the corner near Maple Street when I heard it. A car engine revving. At first, I didn't think much of it, but then the tires squealed. I looked up, and a black car was speeding directly toward me. There was no time to scream, no time to run, just impact. The collision felt like being crushed by a wall. My body was thrown against the pavement. I remember the excruciating pain in my ribs, the ringing in my ears, and the sudden blur of gray sky above. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. And then, silence. Someone shouted. I felt hands on my shoulders. Another voice yelled to call 911. A stranger placed a jacket under my head. "Stay with us," he said. "You're going to be okay." I faded in and out of consciousness as the ambulance arrived. My vision was dark around the edges, but I remember one thing clearly. The car didn't stop. It never slowed down. Whoever hit me wanted me dead. In the hospital, I drifted between sleep and pain. The doctors stated I had broken ribs, a mild concussion, and severe bruising across my side. I couldn't stand. I couldn't speak for a day. The police came and filed a report. "Probably just a reckless driver," one officer said while taking notes. But I knew better. I felt it in my bones. This wasn't an accident. It was a message, and it wouldn't be the last. 3 days passed in the hospital. My body ached with every breath. My head throbbed, and bruises stretched from my collarbone to my hips. I couldn't sit up without help. The nurses were kind, checking in frequently, ensuring I was eating, cleaning my wounds, and helping me rest. I was alone, but at least I was safe. Not once did Marka or Mira visit. The hospital had called them. I had overheard the nurse gently speaking on the phone. "Yes, your daughter is stable but in rough condition." I waited, expecting something. At least a text, a question, a brief visit. Nothing until the 3rd day. It was early afternoon when my nurse finished adjusting my IV and left the room. I was alone, drowsy and half asleep, when the door creaked open. My heart raced. It was Marka. She entered quietly, holding a bouquet of white lilies in one hand and a thick brown envelope in the other. Her face was composed, too calm, like someone rehearsing an apology. I couldn't read her expression. "Hello, sweetheart," she said, placing the flowers on the table beside me. "How are you feeling?" I said nothing. My throat felt tight and my body stiffened. She hadn't even called in 3 days. And now she was here with flowers and papers. She sat at the edge of the bed and sighed deeply, as if this moment was difficult for her. Slowly, she opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of documents. "I know you're in pain," she said gently, "so I'll keep this simple. Sign these, and you'll transfer the house and investment accounts to Mira. It's the right thing to do." I blinked, disbelief and anger rising in my chest. "No." Her expression changed instantly. Her mask fell away, and the coldness I had grown up with returned in a flash. "You ungrateful little girl," she hissed. "We gave you everything. You were nothing before this. You think you deserve all of it?" "I won't sign," I said, my voice cracking but firm. "It was Dad's decision." Her eyes narrowed. "Then I'll make you." Before I could press the call button, her hand balled into a fist and swung quickly, striking the side of my already injured head. Pain exploded through my skull. I cried out, my scream echoing through the hospital floor. Within seconds, the door burst open, a nurse shouted, and 2 security guards rushed in, yanking her off me. "What's happening here?" one demanded. "She hit me," I gasped, clutching my head. "She was trying to force me to sign something." Marka attempted to recover, putting on a fake expression. "It's just a misunderstanding. I was upset." "Save it," the guard snapped. "You just assaulted a patient." The nurse already had her phone out. "I'm calling the police." Marka's face drained of color. She started to protest, but one of the guards held her arms behind her back as she kicked and yelled, "You'll regret this, Lena!" she screamed as they pulled her toward the hallway. "This isn't over." I shut my eyes, trembling. I wasn't shaking from pain this time, but from the truth settling in. My own mother had just hit me in a hospital bed for money, and something deep inside me finally snapped. This time I wasn't going to be silent. The police arrived within minutes. By the time they entered my hospital room, Marka was already in custody, handcuffed and flanked by 2 security officers, still shouting about misunderstandings and disrespect. But no one was listening anymore. A female officer gently approached my bedside. "Miss Carter, can you speak with us?" I nodded slowly, pain flaring in my ribs. They took my statement carefully. I told them everything, the documents, the threats, and how she attacked me. The nurses and guards corroborated my story. It was open and shut. Physical assault and attempted coercion. She was charged on the spot and taken to the station. But that was just the beginning. The officer's partner stayed behind and asked one more question. "Has anything like this happened recently? Something that seemed off?" That's when I told him about the car, the hit and run. His expression shifted. "Do you remember the license plate, the make of the car, anything at all?" I shook my head weakly. It was too fast, but it didn't feel like an accident. The officer took notes. "We'll look into it. That's serious." I didn't expect anything to come of it, but 3 days later, a detective returned to my hospital room with news that made my blood run cold. They had traced the vehicle, a black sedan registered to a man with a criminal record for theft and fraud. He had fled the state but was caught crossing into Arizona. When they questioned him about the hit and run, he cracked. He confessed he'd been paid to hit me by my mother and sister. They had approached him weeks earlier, offering cash and a clean getaway. All he had to do was ensure I didn't live to collect the inheritance. When the police raided our home with a warrant, they found hidden cash, burner phones, and notes written in Mira's handwriting detailing my routines. When I usually left the house and which streets I often walked. They arrested Mira that same night. I was still in bed when I got the call. The officer's voice was calm yet heavy. "Miss Carter," he said, "your sister is in custody. We have more than enough evidence to charge them both with attempted murder and conspiracy." I stared at the wall in silence, trying to breathe, trying to feel something other than betrayal. But there was nothing left except one thought repeating over and over. They really tried to kill me for money. The trial began 6 weeks after I was released from the hospital. By then, I could walk short distances with a cane. My ribs were still, healing, and my body bore the scars of what had happened. Not just physically, but emotionally. Still, I was determined to show up in court with my head held high. I wasn't there just to testify. I was there to ensure justice had a face. Mine. The courtroom felt sterile, cold, almost like a hospital in its own way. The walls were pale and the lights harsh. Marka and Mira sat together on the other side, shackled and dressed in plain beige jumpsuits. There was no remorse in their eyes, just resentment. Mira refused to look at me. Marka, on the other hand, stared as if she still believed she could control the narrative. But she couldn't anymore. The prosecutor did his job with precision. He laid out everything: the physical assault in the hospital, the forged inheritance documents, and most damning of all, the murder plot. The drivers, confession, the burner phones, the handwritten notes detailing my routines. Every ugly truth was revealed under oath. When I was called to the stand, my legs trembled, but my voice didn't. I spoke about my childhood, the silent emotional abuse, the way I grew up being erased in my own home. I told them about my father, the only person who had truly seen me, and how his death had been followed by a betrayal deeper than death itself. Mira cried on the stand, calling it a mistake. Marka remained stone-faced. Their lawyer attempted to spin it as desperation born from grief, but desperation doesn't hire a hitman. The judge recognized it for what it was: planned, malicious, and heartless. In his final comments, he stated, "This wasn't a moment of passion. This was a premeditated attempt to take a life for money." Then he sentenced both Marka and Mira to 20 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for at least 12. He also ordered them to pay $50,000 in restitution for my medical expenses and emotional damages. As they were led away, Marka turned and hissed, "You think you've won, Lena?" I looked at her without blinking. "No," I replied. "I survived, and you lost far more than just money." It's been a year since the trial concluded, and life has slowly started to feel like mine again. I live in the same house my father left me, but it feels different now. Safe, warm, and truly mine. I renovated it, not just for comfort, but to erase the shadows they left behind. New paint, new furniture, new beginnings. The rental property my father owned still brings in income, and his savings provided me with enough to start something. That matters far more than anything they attempted to take from me. I opened the Robert Carter Foundation 6 months ago. It began with just one office, 2 rooms, and a mission to assist women who have been betrayed by those who were meant to protect them. Women like me. Now, the center buzzes with life. Women come here with stories etched into their skin and hearts, and slowly, they begin to heal. We provide food, shelter, legal support, and something rarer: belief. We believe them, even when no one else ever did. Sometimes people ask me, "Why didn't you just take the money and disappear, start fresh somewhere far away?" I tell them the truth: healing isn't just for me. I needed to transform that pain into something that reached farther than the walls of my own survival. One morning, I sat by the large window in my office, sipping tea, when a young woman entered with bruises under her eyes and trembling hands. I welcomed her with a smile and said, "You're safe here now." That moment felt like everything my father would have wanted for me. I miss him every day, but I carry his love in every person this foundation helps. To anyone listening, if they told you that your worth depended on how much you gave, how quiet you remained, or how small you made yourself, they were wrong. They tried to silence me for money. Instead, I used that money to give others their voices back. This isn't just the conclusion of their story, it's the beginning of mine. Thank you so much for watching.